It is Saturday morning cartoons. And I am in my Saturday morning cartoon hooded sweatshirt trying to keep warm. It's even going to start raining pretty soon. But anyway, happy Saturday morning, everyone. And I want to have some fun this morning with a couple things that concern time, because tonight or early tomorrow morning at 2 o'clock in the morning, supposedly everybody turns their clock back to standard time. In other words, for the last, I don't know how many months, 6 months or so, we've been on, in California anyway, on so-called daylight savings time. Now, I think it's a big conspiracy to throw our circadian rhythms all off, so that we're addled and buy things off of television commercials. It might not be too far from the truth, actually. Whatever it is, we don't like daylight savings time. And even when they're passing legislation that is going to leave daylight savings time so people won't be confused. But why don't they just leave standard time? Okay, I don't know. We don't like daylight savings time, and perhaps you do. But anyway, supposedly we go back to normal tomorrow, and we'll be trying to readjust for 6 months before we go back to daylight savings time. But anyway, I just want to talk about time this morning. And I want to share with you a childhood memory, first of all. I was a very, very lucky little boy growing up from 7 years old to 17 years old in Nebraska. I had an older brother, Mark, who was 6 years older than I, and he was sort of plugged in pretty well to the blossoming culture of rock and roll, of jazz, of it was a great advantage to have an influence in my life that was more mature, 6 years older, more mature and more in tune with cultural things. And it sort of gave me a head start. And it's pretty clear, and it's always been pretty clear to me that, and maybe it is for everybody, that you're somewhat different, okay? And Nebraska was sort of a cultural desert, with all due respect to the provincial advantages of growing up in a rural area. And I had four things that I credit with kind of saving my sanity and setting the stage for who and what I am and what I do. And first one was movies. I was allowed to go to the movies by myself on Saturday and Sunday. And for many years, that's what I did every Saturday and every Sunday. And I didn't care what the movie was, I'd go. And if I liked the movie, I would sit there and watch it, replay and replay and replay. I love the movies, okay? Second thing was let's see, what was the second thing? Oh, the second thing was Edgar Allan Poe and the literature of horror. I like that. The third thing that, and this was a very, very major influence, was Mad magazine. Yes, I wasn't into comic books at all. I was into Mad magazine. Cracked magazine came out a few years after Mad magazine started, but I wasn't a big Cracked fan, although it was a quality, crazy, crazy thing. But Mad magazine, Alfred E. Newman, What Me Worry. It was very influential. I am who I am because of Mad. Okay. The fourth thing was, and this I have to credit my brother with, was Ken Nordine. That's Nordine. He was a Chicago radio host, radio announcer. You'd hear his voice on many commercials. You'd instantly recognize his sardonic voice. And he, in cooperation with Fred Katz, the jazz artist, did a series of albums called Word Jazz. And my brother bought the Word Jazz albums, and I would listen to them on a little portable record player, and I'd listen to them at night over and over and over. They were poetry, sort of like beatnik poetry, with jazz in the background. And Ken Nordine's just hypnotic voice. And I would memorize those poems. Now we're talking 8, 9, 10 years old. And I had these poems memorized. And I could do them in school, in the playground. I'd go, in a dream I dreamt there was no dream. In a sleep I slept, there was no sleep. I met the junk man in his scattered yard. There, in a twilight of hush, my ears stared at the wag of his broken jaw as he ranted over the rule of ruin. And of course, my contemporaries went, Lonnie's crazy, okay. But anyway, because of time, and I'm digressing all over the place here, because of the theme of time, I remember a Ken Nordine cut off of his Word Jazz or Son of Word Jazz album called I Know What Time It Is. Or, no, what time is it? Okay. And it's real short, and I'm going to read it to you, okay, in honor of Daylight Savings Time's death tonight. There was this guy who was a regular guy who lived a regular life, got up at 7:30 every morning, had the same breakfast, kissed the same wife goodbye every morning, went to the same office, came home Monday through Friday. On Saturdays, he played with the children, did handiwork around the house. Sundays, he took the family out in the station wagon to the suburbs, and there they looked at the houses and the trees, the billboards, the gasoline stations, and the railroad crossings. And his life might have gone on like this forever. Except one night. Something strange happened to him. You see, he went to bed at 10:30. And some of his friends stayed up later. And one of them, closing up a place that closed at 2 in the morning, decided to call this regular liver and said, "What time is it?" on the telephone. When he woke up, he said, "Who's this? Who's this? It's 2 o'clock in the morning. It's no time to call. Bye." But the practical joker called every night, 2 o'clock in the morning. He did this for 2 weeks. Finally, he said, "Who is it? Stop." Finally, after 2 weeks, the practical joker lost interest in the joke and did stop. Then came 2 o'clock, and the phone didn't ring. So he woke up. Why isn't the phone ringing? He discovered that the only way he could go back to sleep was to say, "What time is it?" Look at his watch and say, 2 o'clock. And he could sleep. He did this a couple nights until he began to think, it's 2 o'clock where I am, but what time is it in New York or in Hollywood or in London or Hong Kong and Cairo? He didn't know. So the next day, he went out and he bought himself some clocks. He got clocks from all over and he put them all over the walls. And the time was there. He knew what time it was everywhere that counted. And this made him feel comfortable. He became so interested in time that he got little egg timers and gave them away as presents. He read about time in books. Sidereal time, time way out in the universe. He knew what time it was on Arcturus and the Pleiades and the Milky Way. One night, though, at 2 o'clock in the morning, the light wouldn't go on. The fuse had blown. But suddenly he realized he knew what time it was without even looking. Not only in the important cities of the world, but in the entire universe. And naturally, he began to brag a little the next day. He told people, "I know what time it is." And they tested him, and he did know. The administration had changed at this particular time, and they wanted to save money. So they got rid of all their astronomers and their telescopes, their weights and measures, and they put this man in Washington in a little room where he sits to this day, simply saying, "Beep, the time now is..." Okay, that's what little Lonnie was was into when he was 8 years old. If you don't mind, I would like to share something that may be a little more cabalistically fun for everybody concerning time and Kronos. Okay. And the Kabbalah. And instead of waiting for tomorrow for daylight savings time, I think I'll share it with you right now. Let's see if I got we all know this diagram of the tree of life here. The first top three is called the supernal triad, okay, which is above this area all down here. It's separated from the rest of the tree by what's called the abyss. Okay. Because 1, 2, and 3 aren't really separate numbers. 1, 2, and 3 are just one thinking about itself. Okay. There isn't a manifest universe yet. This area under the abyss here is called the macrocosm. Okay, the world of the planetary spheres. Okay, and way down here in 10, that we could call that the microcosm. Okay, but the planetary spheres are these like 7 layers of heavens, and this is where we have the descending levels of consciousness and the mechanisms that work for those particular frequency levels of consciousness. The gods, the archangels, angels, spirits, intelligences, unique to their own little mini world there. That's called the macrocosm. And here we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 planetary spheres. There's the sun in the middle, surrounded by 5 other planets. But there's this other planet, planetary sphere, Saturn. And Saturn is very weird. And it's in the rarefied neighborhood of the supernal triad itself, number 3. So I try to explain this like this. And remember, if I start to tell a little fairy tale, it's just my own crazy thing here. I think it's fair to ask why Saturn, one of the so-called planetary spheres, qualifies for such an exalted position way up there in the rarefied atmosphere of the supernal triad. After all, Bina, number 3, is above the level of the other macrocosmic planetary spheres, above the abyss, on the other side of the mirror that separates the ideal from the actual. The quick answer is because Saturn is not your ordinary planetary sphere. Saturn resonates as a primitive rumbling from deep within the recesses of our unremembered dreams. From the almost Lovecraftian primordial soup of the old ones. Saturn isn't a god. Saturn is a titan. And titans come before the tidy, balanced, orderly cosmos of the gods of Olympus. Saturn is the king of the titans. And another name for Saturn is Kronos, time. What this fairy tale is trying to describe isn't an event that happened in the past, but a process that's occurring in an eternal now. My occasional use of the past tense is only a clumsy but necessary literary device. In the cabalistic tree of life terms, Saturn is number 3, Bina, and Saturn's father, Uranus, was number 2, Hokmah. We'll get to that in a second. All up in the supernal triad. The Greek god Kronos is Saturn time. Are you ready for a fairy tale? Once before there was time, Saturn, from his Titan throne in number 3 of the supernal triad, felt it was his responsibility to maintain the status quo of his wild and chaotic titanic kingdom of pre-existence. He was paranoid and feared if any of his children were to survive, they would grow up and kill and dethrone him like he did his father Uranus. If a next generation child were to escape Saturn, a new kind of below the abyss world would pop into existence, and the rowdy private party would be over for the roughneck world of the Titans. So, to prevent that from happening, each time his long-suffering wife Rhea, or Ops, presented him with another newborn god-to-be, Saturn, seated at his usual restaurant table number 3, would pop the child in his mouth like a cocktail olive and swallow it whole. Problem solved. First was baby Artemis, who would have made the perfect macrocosmic moon goddess. Then little Hermes, Mercury. Then sweet baby Aphrodite, Venus. Then the radiant little Apollo, Sol. And the feisty baby Ares, or Mars. As long as Saturn kept swallowing his progeny, a manifest macrocosmic creation was put on hold. Even the clock of time was not yet ticking. Everything that could potentially become a thing remained undigested in Saturn's dimensionless belly, in a suspended pre-creational state of pure potentiality. DuQuette's version of the myth goes on to tell how Rhea eventually got tired of all this baby-eating nonsense and decided enough was enough. When it came time to deliver the next baby, Zeus, or Jupiter, she secretly rescued the child and tricked the old Titan by serving him up a buttered stone wrapped in a baby blanket slathered in a vomit-inducing hot sauce. Meanwhile, Rhea made arrangements with a nice centaur foster care facility down in the newly formed neighborhood of the second triad. A new fourth Sephira, Hesed, Mercy, became the permanent address of Zeus Jupiter, the first god below the abyss. Because number 4 is actually the first manifested number in a dimensional world, Zeus looked around and said, "Wow, I must be the self-begotten god because I don't see anybody else in this dimension." So naturally, Jupiter believed he was the first anything there ever was and felt pretty privileged and exceptional, never realizing that his very existence was the result of a 3-part pre-dimensional dance of the supernal triad. The Greeks have a name for this narcissistic and somewhat clueless god below the abyss: Demiurgos. A god who mistakenly believes it is the self-begotten one and only God-King. The Romans called their Demiurgos Jupiter and Jove, spelled Yod. And the Hebrews called the Demiurgos Jehovah, or Yod-He-Vav-He, the great name spelled with 4 letters. Zeus, Jupiter, Jehovah, Amun, Wotan, and many father figure gods are attributed to number 4 Hesed. But meanwhile, let's return to our fairy tale and see what's still happening up in the supernal triad. Saturn was still seriously ill. He finally vomited up the stone, then could no longer keep down the previous 5 babies. One by one, he heaved them out of his titanic maw and they tumbled through the newly torn abyss to land safely as fresh gods of a shiny new macrocosm. First came Ares, Mars, who landed in the 5th Sephira Gebura, strength. Then slid Apollo, the sun, into number 6, Tifereth, beauty. Then Aphrodite, Venus, who set up shop in number 7, Netzach, victory. followed by her brother Hermes, Mercury, in number 8, Hode, Splendor, and finally Artemis, Luna, who landed in number 9, Yesod, the foundation. Zeus, Jupiter, because he was the first to make his appearance below the abyss, had settled himself in number 4, Hesed, Mercy, and convinced his 5 siblings he was their king. I'm not sure real mythologists are Now, I'm sure real mythologists are understandably appalled at my vulgar retelling of this classic tale. But from a cabalistic point of view, this is pretty much the essence of the story. Time. That's our Saturday morning cartoon adventures in time. And I'll see you tomorrow for Sunday school. Until then, set your clock. What is it? It's fall down and spring up. Just remember that, and then you won't be confused. Fall down, spring up. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Love is the law, love under will. Have a good time today.